Perfect. All right. Well, hello and welcome Rancho San Clemente Business Park property owners and secret ballot voters to the Q&A forum regarding the sale of the land to the Emergency Shelter Coalition for the purpose of developing a homeless shelter. My name is Jim Wynn. I am with WynneCRE at Kidder Matthews. I provide real estate solutions for property owners and businesses in South Orange County. I also serve on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce. Hope everyone got a package as you came in. There's extras up front. If you didn't get one, they contain the summary of the pending sale and vote, a copy of the letter and ballot from the association, the procedure for the secret ballot vote, zoning maps, proposed shelter rendering, a Chamber of Commerce membership application, and information about WynneCRE at Kidder Matthews. Before we get started, I'd really like to thank the outlets for hosting this event. This is a venue that is not available to the public for leasing out. The outlets are a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and they let us use this room, so it's really gracious of them to provide this beautiful room for us today. I'd also like to thank Mike Burke and Nancy Hunt, who are board members with the Chamber. So the Chamber is very supportive of the business park. We know how vital it is to the community, so thank you for coming today to show your support. I'd like to give a plug to the Chamber of Commerce. We'd encourage all of you to join us. Not a lot of the business park occupants are members. And there's a lot more issues other than this that are going to come up. We live in California after all, so we need your support. We need the clout, and the more members we have, the more that helps us with the government. And we also have a PAC, a political action committee that helps supports candidates, not only for city council, but broader California elections as well. So we would encourage you, when you leave and in your package, there is a sign up for that. So Susie Lance is here, so she can help you with that if you have any questions as well. So I'd like to thank the multiple property owners who brought this to my attention so we could get the word out. We had an overwhelming response from the property owners when we circulated the complete information, which then spilled out into the community, resulting in over 3,500 views to our story about this vote on our website and hundreds of comments on social media. There was a lot of confusion and questions, so we decided to host this event. We'll continue to publish updates on this event and other breaking news on our website at WynneCRE.com. So I'd like to introduce James Maxinoff, the city manager. And just to clarify, the city does not own this land and is not involved in this decision, so James was gracious enough to be here to answer questions and clarify a lot of things that there are some misunderstandings about. So the city and James in particular has been a really good partner for the Chamber. This has been really transparent and accessible and responsive, so we appreciate him being here. And then I'd like to introduce Tom Muriella, who is the attorney for the Rancho San Clemente Business Park Community Association. Thank you, Tom, for making the time on short notice. I know this happened really quickly, so thank you for clearing your schedule to be here. And I know there's lots of questions that people ask and need to have answered. So I would like to remind everyone, we had a candidate forum here a couple of weeks ago, and they were running for office, and so they subjected themselves to questions because they're trying to accomplish something. But both these gentlemen here are our guests today, so if we could remember that and treat them with respect, we would appreciate that. So I'd like to start with some questions that I've heard already from concerned property owners, and then we'll turn it over to the property owners, because I'm sure you'll have other questions as well. So I'd like to just go ahead and start with that the letter that the association sent out with the ballot states that the two parcels that are in escrow are within the city's SB2 homeless shelter zoning overlay. Is that accurate?
No, it's not. The properties, they're on the north side of Pico, Avenida Pico, and those are not in the SB2 zone. The SB2 zone, there's a map of it on the city's webpage that shows all the properties within the city's SB2 zone. The SB2 zone was developed, I think, going back to 2016, 2017, by requirement of state law that requires all cities to designate an area within the city where a homeless shelter can be built by right. And what that means is that a shelter operator can go in and develop a shelter operation without getting entitlements from the city's planning department for that operation. They would still need city approvals for building permits and building inspection, that sort of thing. But as far as getting planning approval, an operator would not need that in the SB2 zone. And that SB2 zone is roughly the business park proper up to, I believe, Heritage Christian Church is within it, and on that side of La Plata.
Tom, do you have any comment? Do you want to make a comment?
Sure. I'm surprised to hear that, James, you and I have not spoken about this before, but our understanding was that the 10 acres are in the SB2 zone, and that's, as you know, we're under contract to sell the 10 acres, and the buyer's understanding is that they are in the SB2 zone. So, you may be right.
I may be
if
right.
you are, I stand corrected, but we'll have to look at that.
Yeah.
So we did provide a copy of the SB2 zone overlay. It's in section 4 of the package. So if anyone wanted to take a look at that, that was on the sanclemente.org website.
And it doesn't show the property.
And the 10 acres are not shown within the overlay boundary. The letter states that it is unknown how the buyer could circumvent the open space restrictions, and that the buyer is assuming that risk. How could the Homeless Shelter Coalition overcome the open space restrictions?
Back in 2008, prior to my time with the city adopted by referendum, I believe it's called Measure V, which requires any open space in the city, any property designated as open space. If you're going to develop that space and it's greater than 1 acre in size, then it has to go to a vote of the people. And you need a majority of the City of San Clemente residents to develop that property. So right now, I believe that property in Pico Canyon is zoned as open space private. And if a project takes place greater than 1 acre, then it would need to go to a vote of the people.
Address that. My understanding is that under Measure C, which is the open space zoning measure that was enacted by a citywide vote of the people in the early 2000s, I believe, there are other exceptions that would allow development within that open space zoning, in addition to another vote of the people. There is an exception, and I don't have the language, but it has to do with an overriding statement of emergency health and safety issues, a finding by the city, which would allow development in that parcel, in addition to a public vote.
And you said that's Measure C?
Yes. And I guess, just to clarify, James, because I'm confused about this, so you had said that 10 acres is not subject to SB2, and yet our discussion, the most recent, pursuant to the most recent question by James, seemed to indicate that there are open space restrictions. Can you clarify that for me, for the others?
The property, as far as I know, the last time I looked it up, was zoned as open space private. So staff tells me that that would require a zoning change and or a vote of the people to have that open space requirement changed and overrun.
And we do have that land use exhibit also in tab 4, and it does look like that is open space private. Another question I've heard is, could the county take the property through eminent domain and allow a shelter to be built on these parcels?
I guess the county could do that, but would the county do that? I've spoken to supervisors Bartlett's office, and her office has told me that there is no interest from her office in doing that. And her office has also spoken to county executive staff. And right now, I'll read the email to you that they sent me. If the Rancho San Clemente property owners were to approve the sale of parcels for use as an emergency shelter, Supervisor Bartlett would not support any effort to obtain county funding or ongoing shelter operations. Our office has verified that county staff is not in discussions with the Emergency Shelter Coalition and would not commit to using this property for a regional shelter.
The letter states that the association board believes that if homeless shelter were built on the parcels, now in escrow, that this would decrease the likelihood of a shelter being constructed in the business park. How would you describe that belief?
I had a conversation with Bob Adams, the president of the association, about 2 weeks ago, and Bob indicated to me that, and maybe Tom can back this up or dispute it, is that Bob thought that a shelter is inevitable in San Clemente, and that the 10 acres is a better location for it than being within the business park proper. I'm not convinced that a shelter is inevitable. We filed an amicus brief recently to have the Supreme Court take up the case of Martin v. Boise that has placed difficulty on western cities when it comes to enforcement of different camping ordinances and such. We figure we'll hear sometime later this month or early November if the Supreme Court is going to hear that case. And if they do hear Martin v. Boise, we'll probably know next June how they're going to rule on it. The 4th Circuit and the 11th Circuit courts have both ruled on homelessness completely different than the 9th Circuit court did. That was where Boise was heard. The dissenting judge in Martin v. Boise basically cribbed his response from the 4th Circuit, from what I understand. So hopefully the Supreme Court takes up Martin v. Boise and tries to reconcile the differences between the different circuit courts out there.
Yeah, I think it's important for me to address what this vote is of the owners and what it isn't, and give some background in order to respond to the question about whether a potential homeless shelter in the 10 acres north of Pico would affect the likelihood of a shelter being built within the main body of the business park. We do think it would make it less likely. There are no guarantees in this life. The business park is still zoned for the emergency homeless shelter overlay. We do think it would make it less likely that a homeless shelter would be built in the park. But if I can take 2 minutes, because I think this is important background. People have been discussing the owner vote as a vote to sell the parcels. It's not a vote whether to sell the parcels or not. It is a vote that is required to terminate the parcels from the covenants and the CC&Rs of the Master Association. It may be a subtle difference, but the board did not need approval of the owners to vote to sell the parcels. And there's a history here. These 2 parcels, totaling 10 acres north of Pico, were transferred to the Master Association, the business park, in the 90s. I believe it was 1996, for free. And they have been undeveloped since that time. They are subject to open space restrictions, which has inhibited the ability to develop them. They're owned by the Business Park Master Association. Over the years, the association has annually paid something like $20,000 on average to maintain these parcels. That includes insurance, water, landscaping, security. The Master Association and the Business Park and the owners do not derive any value from these parcels. The homeless are already on these parcels. They've been camping there for many years, and the Sheriff's Department, the city is well familiar with that. So this is the background. So over the years, the association has looked for an opportunity to liquidate these parcels because they're costing the association and hence the owners a lot of money. They're creating security risks. They're creating fire risks for neighbors above and around. And they're not providing any economic utility. And they've been tough parcels to get people interested in. And we've talked to various buyers over the years, and those efforts were unsuccessful. In 2016, we offered the parcels to the city for free as part of the discussion of the homeless zoning overlay. And many of you recall that was a very active and contentious period where we were before we being all the citizens, including the business part, were before the Planning Commission, the City Council. And the association, frankly, really tried very hard to keep the homeless zoning overlay out of the business part. We didn't want it. We recognized that the homeless issue needs to be addressed, but we did not want the zoning of the business part. We lost that fight ultimately. So we've been looking for a buyer for years. In 2019, the Emergency Shelter Coalition approached us and offered to buy the parcel. It was at a price that was above the appraisal that we had done in 2017, and we are under contract to sell that. So the letter describes the board's and the association's reasons for requesting your vote in favor of a vote of terminating the parcels from the Master Association, CC&Rs. It gives some of the policy reasons, and one of those reasons, there are many reasons, aside from cost savings, increased security, but one of the reasons is we are selling it to a homeless advocate association. There's no secret that they want to develop a homeless shelter there. We are not, the board and the association are not advocating for a homeless shelter there, but we understand what the seller would like to do. We don't know how they would do that under the current zoning restrictions. I've talked to seller's counsel about it. He claims that he's not sure as to how they would do that. I don't know if that's true or not. But we do think that if the parcels are dissociated or terminated from the Master Association through this vote, this deal will close. Now, whether a homeless shelter will ever be built on those parcels or not, I don't know, and I don't think anyone here can predict that, honestly. But we do think that if the deal closes, it will make it much less likely that a homeless shelter will be constructed within the business park, which is a real possibility. This is the main homeless shelter advocate group in Orange County. They have focused on San Clemente for good or not good. San Clemente was one of the last, if not the last, municipality to get into compliance with SB2 zoning, and I think that has put the city in a somewhat difficult spot, but here we are. So I hope that helps answer them. It's a very long answer to a short question.
I think that's accurate. Most cities did adopt SB2 zones quite some time ago. I started with the city in September 29th of 2014. I remember those sorts of dates. And the city adopted an SB2 zone in August of 2014. And I remember coming to a city council meeting and how contentious that meeting was as they considered the SB2 issue. And Ed Connor, who's one of the principals, he's an attorney, and he's one of the principals of the Emergency Shelter Coalition, has stated as such that San Clemente is in his sights because we were one of the last cities in Orange County to adopt an SB2 ordinance back in 2014. The interesting thing about Ed Connor that he won't tell you is that he's a resident of San Juan Capistrano, and Dana Point and San Juan Capistrano adopted similar ordinances to San Clemente. We shared the same city attorney firm at that time, in the early part of the 2010s, he challenged San Clemente, and ultimately our ordinance was found to be inadequate, and we had to settle with him and pay him close to $500,000 in attorney's fees. But he didn't challenge Dana Point or San Juan over their ordinances, and their ordinances still remain in effect, but are very similar to what the courts overturned back in 2016. And then when our zoning, our SB2 zone was changed by the courts, or overturned by the courts in 16, then the city adopted the SB2 zone that's in place right now that incorporates the business park into it. Mr. Connor challenged that ordinance before the courts, and the city ultimately prevailed in that. And then Mr. Connor challenged our housing element that we have to provide to the state housing and community development, HCD, up in Sacramento. And he challenged us in Sacramento over that. We ultimately prevailed over him on that issue. So it's been an interesting relationship with Mr. Connor when it comes to homeless issues within the city of San Clemente and the target that he's placed on us over the past 5-6 years.
If the property owners don't vote to remove the property from the CC&Rs, is there anything in the CC&Rs that would prevent a shelter from being built?
I guess that's a question for Mr. Mariello. You know, the city back in August, on August 20th, we provided the city council with a potential homeless shelter option at 950 Negocio. We had been talking to a property owner that was willing to lease his property to the city. It's about 7,000 square feet, and we were thinking of maybe doing up to 35 beds, shelters there. And we took that to the city council for their approval on August 20th, and the business park showed up and told us that, to that city council meeting, and told the city council that even if you approve this project, that the board for the Business Park Association would not approve it and would litigate it.
My understanding is that the CC&Rs may preclude the development of a shelter if the land remains within the CC&Rs for a variety of reasons. I think more importantly, if the vote is negative, if the owners vote to not terminate the CC&Rs as to the two parcels that we're discussing, the buyer will not close, and they're entitled to not close if the property is not dissociated from the CC&Rs.
That leads into my next question, because the letter does state that the termination of the parcels from the CC&Rs is a condition of the closing. But could the buyer choose to purchase the property if the parcels are not terminated? Does that just give them a right to terminate, or is it automatically terminated?
The termination of the property from the CC&Rs, which requires a vote, is a condition of the closing. So if that condition is not satisfied, then the buyer would not close. Could they choose to waive that condition and close? Theoretically, yes, they could, but they won't.
And is the main reason that they want the CC&Rs waived is for the association fees, or is there some other reason why they want those removed?
I think it's everything. It would complicate their plans for the property if they were subject to the strictures of an 80-page CC&Rs that has a lot of detailed restrictions on the use of the property. And it could be the fees issue as well. You'd have to ask them, but their view is clear.
Okay. If the sale takes place and the county overrides the open space restrictions, would the shelter be limited to 35 beds?
Right now, our SB2 ordinance says that a shelter can be built in the SB2 zone for up to 35 beds per property, with a maximum of 70 beds total in the SB2 zone. Seeing as how this property is outside of the SB2 zone, I would think that it wouldn't be subject to that 35 bed requirement if the property owner was able to get the necessary Measure B overrides and zoning overrides, and then it wouldn't be subject to 35 beds. Mr. Connor stated to me and the city attorney and Mayor Pro Tem Dan Bain back in February that he would do 75 beds there to start. When I asked him if the beds would be limited to homeless people from San Clemente, he said that they would start with San Clemente, but there was no guarantees that it would be just for San Clemente homeless people.
In the package under tab number 5, we have provided the renderings for the homeless shelter that Ed Connor presented at one of the city council meetings. So what he presented and was willing to present in public does show, I think it's actually 72 beds, so I don't know if there's any limitations beyond that 72 or 75 beds.
I think that Mr. Connor would like to see something greater than 35 beds because it comes down to economies of scale, and providing homeless services for 35 people is much more expensive than providing on a per capita basis than providing services to 60 or 70 or 80 people. So it's an economy of scales issue for him.
Is the city of San Clemente willing to purchase the parcels from the association?
My direction from the city council is, if possible, to buy the property from the business park.
If the city were able to acquire the property, what safeguards could be put in place to assure that the property would not be developed as a homeless shelter?
Right now, if we bought the property, the conversation that we've been having internally in regards to it would be to put some sort of conservation easements on the property. That would limit its development in the future. Part of the reason for that is to A, safeguard it from a shelter, but B, also, as many of you know, we're also dealing with the toll road extension through San Clemente. And one of the options is Idea 14, and Idea 14 brings the toll road down Pico and does a flyover adjacent to the high school where it connects to the 5 freeway. So earlier this year, we did a project with the Marblehead residential community because they own some of the property in Pico Canyon, and we did some conservation easements on their property. So this would just be another piece of the puzzle, so to speak, in that battle with the TCA and the extension of the 241 down Pico.
I've had a lot of questions about the vote. How is the vote counted? Could you talk about the procedure for the secret ballot vote count?
I can speak only generally to that, which is that ballots were mailed out last Monday to owners, and they are required to complete the ballots and return them within 30 days.
Okay, I understand that the board, go ahead.
The city owns 2 lots in the business park, and we plan to vote against it.
I understand that the board will follow the procedures for vote counting per Civil Code number 5115 and 5120, which is in section 3 of the package. The last sentence of sentence 5120 of the laws on the vote count state that once a secret ballot is received by the inspector of elections, it shall be irrevocable. If a property owner has already voted prior to today's meeting and the information today changes the way they wanted to vote, or it's discovered that the information in the letter accompanying the ballot was incorrect, what mechanism is there for them to change their vote? Or is it?
I've not researched that issue, and I can't answer it definitively.
Okay, so those are the questions that I've heard from the community. It looks like Glenn, you have a question?
Yeah, quite a few. First, I understand why the board and Bob want to get rid of the property. I support that. However, there's been a lot of things that have said that I don't feel are accurate. James, can you speak first of all about what Ed Connor's ultimate plan is and what he's presented in terms of the 6.4 acres We just presented that in public, correct, about permanent support housing and large homeless shelter, et cetera.
He came to the city council meeting earlier this summer and talked about, in his brief 3 minutes, some plans to do shelter. And I go back to the February meeting that I had with him where he talked about doing 75 beds there. As far as permanent supportive housing, I can't answer that at this time.
And then what about, and maybe Tom, this question for you, that this escrow currently is for 2 1-acre parcels. And the board and Bob, at least when Bob came to my office and talked to me, said that we need to get rid of the liability, we need to get rid of the fire, we need to get rid of the costs associated with it. And I understand all that. But when we're in escrow to sell 2 1-acre parcels, who's taking responsibility, ownership, and liability for the other 8 acres?
We're selling the entire 2 parcels, which total 10 acres.
Okay, that's, I was told different, that it was 2 1-acre parcels. And then the SB2 zone, the letter that went out, talked about that it's less likely for a shelter to go in the business park, and that it's 100% accurate. I mean, it may stop Ed Connor from going in there. I haven't seen the agreement, but it may stop Ed Connor, as Bob said that he did agree to, if they got this, not to pursue anything. But the numerous other entities could still at any time be in the business park, correct?
What we said in the letter was that in our opinion, it makes it less likely that a shelter will actually be developed in the business park. And that's based on the fact that the Emergency Shelter Coalition is the main nonprofit who is really driving the development of a homeless shelter in South OC and San Clemente. So we do think that's accurate, and if the vote is negative, I've been told by Ed Connor that they are actively or will be actively looking to put a shelter in the park, which is zoned for a shelter. So that's the basis. There's no guarantee that a shelter will not be developed in the business park in the future, but it does make it less likely, in our opinion. And look, there was a shelter proposal, that, as you know, that came before the city in, I believe, early August to build it. I think it was 950 Negocio, and there were a lot of problems with that proposal. And fortunately, the city council agreed with the public and with the owners, including the business park. So there is room to address shelters as they come up and fight them, and they still have to comply with various code and other requirements and the CC&Rs, which everyone has overlooked in this drama, which we think restrict the ability to develop shelters, residences in the park, etc. But again, the board thinks that it's less likely that a shelter will be developed in the body of the park, and the board wants to keep a shelter out of the body of the park, the main park.
So in my opinion, if Ed Connor wanted to put a shelter in the business park, he'd argued for years and years and years. He could have already put one in the SB2 zone, but as James mentioned, it's the economy of scale. There's 35 beds. It doesn't make sense. So that's why he wants to build outside and ultimately go up to the plan that he's presented.
Well, if the economy of scale doesn't make sense within the park, the main body of the park, then that's an argument against the likelihood of development of a shelter in the body of the park. Again, no guarantees, but I do think it makes it less likely.
Is Ed Connor, the Orange County Homeless Shelter Coalition, is he attached to that?
Emergency shelter.
Yes, Ed Connor is the attorney of record for the Emergency Shelter Coalition. He may also be a board member or an officer of that entity. I'm not sure about the last part.
So then for the city, if he's an attorney, he can appeal to Sacramento, correct? And Sacramento can take that land by way of eminent domain. I've been through a case here in Anaheim, California for 4 years with the state of California. With 5 freeway and Caltrans, and I think intimate knowledge of how it works, but if that's his last resort, my question to you, what's your first name, sir?
James.
James. My question to you is that, are you beholden to Sacramento as a city? If the governor calls down and says, because the homeless thing is in the news every night, and it's a hot topic, it's gonna go somewhere, and they're gonna do whatever it takes to fix it. So my question is, are you beholden to Sacramento? If they call down and say, you know what, we're taking that land, it's ours, there's nothing you can do about it. By way of
I think the city would explore its legal options to oppose it. But, the state is the bigger dog in the room, so to speak. If they want to use eminent domain to take a property and they can meet the requirements for best public use and necessity as they're required to do, and the courts agree with them, then they're the state. The county also has that ability, but the county has so far shown that they're not willing to do a project against the wishes of the host city. You saw, what was it, back in, was it February of 18, March of 18, when the county proposed doing a project on county land in Laguna Niguel. And Laguna Niguel was up in arms, and they opposed it, and the county backed down to it. They also proposed a project in Irvine on county-owned land, and Irvine opposed it. And the supervisor's office has told me that while they have the right to do projects like this, they aren't willing to go over the host city's wishes.
So that, you read an email from Lisa Bartlett's office that mentioned that they're not interested in funding it. But whether they're funding it or not, they can easily change the zone, correct?
I think that would be difficult. It's not that they can't do it. It's something that the city attorney and I have been having a conversation about. I can't, it's not an easy process.
So this is kind of where the frustrating part comes for me, is city council is saying completely different. One message I got from one city council member would be that the city or the county could change the zone. That's why I put that. And the city has no interest in that, but the county would, because the county's trying to get any city to step up for regional shelter, and they do it in heartbeat. The exact words that I got was that San Clemente would be the de facto regional shelter for South County. So it's frustrating, and I understand that you got the facts that you have, but the city council members that I've spoken to are saying completely different. And I was also told that there was going to be some conversations between city council and yourself prior to this meeting, so that people would get what others feel. Because I have, Bob told me that you said that you guys met, he said he went to my office, talked to you, and then we talked the following day, and he said, James told me that the county's not going to be able to do that, or that they most likely won't do that. And that is against everything I'm being told, specifically from Washington.
Well, I'm dealing with a staff person at Supervisor Bartlett's office, and they've told me that they're not interested, the Supervisor Bartlett isn't interested in doing a project. There's 5 supervisors. Lisa Bartlett is one. She's 20% of the vote. Could the other ones go against her? Possibly. In my close to 30-year career in local government, typically supervisors, when they say they want to do something or they don't want to do something in their district, the other supervisors go along. They don't oppose them on district issues of which that supervisor is a part of. So, but again, Supervisor Bartlett is 1 vote out of 5.
You referred earlier to the the requirement to go to a vote of the city to rezone the open space for if it's over an acre? What happens if it's under an acre? Because presumably they could buy 10 acres and only look to entitle or rezone 0.9 acres, I suppose. Is that correct? That could be a possibility.
Correct.
So what if that requirement to take it to a vote of the city is not triggered because the 1 acre threshold is not met? Then what's the process?
They still need to change the zoning, because right now it's zoned for open space, and I believe that they would still need to go through an environmental study to change that zoning and change the general plan for that area. So it would still be a process of public hearings and such that they would need to go through the planning commission and through city council for ultimate approval. But I don't think, the project in its scope appears to be, something that'd be quite difficult to do on less than an acre. But I'll take the packet back to the office and take a look at it with staff.
And a question for Tom is, given the hot button nature of this issue, and I understand the board of directors, based upon what you just said, does not require the approval of the membership of the association to sell the parcel. However, given the fact that this is a very hot button issue, why is it that they took it upon themselves to make this decision without putting more information out there?
Well, the board acted in its discretion as a steward of the property of the association. No matter what the board did on an issue affecting a potential homeless shelter in San Clemente, it's going to be controversial. We put out the information that we thought would be useful to the owners along with the ballots, and we're happy to try to answer any other questions that you have.
Far back.
Go ahead, Jay.
How are you? Okay, so if in fact it's voted down, and that property over there, the 10 acres, would that be up for sale to anybody that would want to buy it if they use that for parks and recreation and stuff?
That would be up to whether there are offers to purchase the property, and it would be up to the board as to whether to entertain those offers. That hasn't been the case. We're under contract now. Should the vote be negative, then the sale will not go through. So the slate is clean.
So those 10 acres, is there other acres down across from the school that might be available, maybe to put more parking in and trails for those kids at school and all that area right there that would help the school and stuff? All that's a beautiful parcel all the way from the freeway all the way up to La Plata that's not being used for anything. And could somebody buy that and donate it and give it to the school and let the school put a trail in there for those kids? Or
I think that property across from the school is part of the Marblehead Association, but I don't know for sure. I'd have to go back to the office and check the parcels. There's actually a trail from La Plata to Veracruz in that green belt right there, and I've discussed with staff continuing that trail down along the creek and to the end of the property. So we have looked at that potentially. There's the creek down there is what's called a blue line waterway. So any project down there would need to go to, staff has told me would need to go to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for approval because of that blue line stream down there. We actually looked at maybe using goats out there to knock down the brush in that area, and the permitting requirements were pretty onerous to get the goats out there to knock down the brush.
it might be for sale. I mean, if it was voted negative, it could be for sale for somebody that might want to buy it, turn that into a park area for the schools. Or
I think if If Emergency Shelter Coalition walked away from this site because they didn't get the vote that they wanted, I think that the city would still be interested in purchasing that 10 acres. We would like to see it, see another vote to change the CC&Rs because that $314 a month per acre adds up pretty quickly at over $36,000 a year in maintenance fees, and we'll take care of it. And as I said, we would look to put a conservation easement on it.
I have a question for Jim and Tom. It's an ethical and a legal question. I'm pretty sure I know the ethical answer to it, but I'd like to hear it from you. If I wanted to sell my building and get out of San Clemente, am I required, legal part, by the state of California to disclose that my building is in an SB2 zone? Or is it ethically just the right thing to do?
That is a perfect question for an expert realtor. Are there any in the house?
Right next to you.
Well, I'm not a realtor. My understanding is that you have to disclose information that would be material to a buyer. I think that the zoning is something that would show up, and I'm not giving legal or real estate advice here, but I think the zoning is something that would show up on the title report. If you want it to be belt and suspenders, you might want to also put it in your form disclosure document.
Yeah, a lot of our purchase and sale agreements are with the AIR, American Industrial Real Estate Association, and there is a property information sheet there that the property owner fills out. So there probably would be a generality that's included in that, and then there's also a mandatory disclosure form that's typically submitted by a third party. It includes things like fire zones, earthquake zones, so probably the SB2 zone would show up in there. So it's likely that the buyer would be aware of it being in an SB2 zone and then would be making that choice as to whether or not they wanted to pursue the purchase based on that information.
But you don't know for sure if it's state law required? Those forms come from the state, correct?
No, the forms, the AIR is a third-party organization that started probably over 40 years ago. That those forms have evolved over the years based on different legal matters. So I don't know the answer to that question if that's a state law or not, but if there's a property information sheet where you have to fill out information about the property and the zoning, then I would suspect that that SB2 zone, if the property owner was aware of it, would need to fill that out. And I'm sure it would come up in the mandatory disclosure form by the third party as well.
Okay, thank you, guys.
My recollection of the property information sheet is that it includes earthquake zones and flood zones and all kind of variations on that. It includes amenities such as electrical, et cetera, et cetera. It includes mold, but it doesn't have a form checklist for zoning, unusual zoning. But if I would make sure that the buyer is aware of it and make that of record. And I don't think there's a state law that says
You would. Not legally.
ethically and legally. I don't think there, and again, I could be wrong. I don't think there's a state law that says you must disclose, you must educate the buyer as to the zoning. Now, there may be a California appellate case on this that says in these facts you should have disclosed it and you didn't, and buyer has a cause of action. But again, I'm not sure about that.
See, Nancy has a question. Hold on, Nancy, go ahead.
I completed a title search for a couple properties. I did ask that, I did find out that the zoning was not changed, that there was an overlay, but the zoning was not changed. I believe that's correct.
It's an overlay zone. It's not the,
Right, so it didn't change the zoning of
Yeah.
that particular property, it was an overlay.
Thank you.
Bill, you had a question.
Yeah, given the fact that the city wants to buy the property, and apparently Olin is also wanting to buy the property. Is the board still requesting vote in favor? And if so, why?
We're under contract to sell the property. We are requesting a vote in favor.
Why do we want to sell it to somebody like this? We don't have to.
We are legally under contract to sell it, and there were no offers to purchase this property before a week ago.
Yeah, but now
We've tried.
it's not a week ago, now it's now.
Sure, we're under legal contract to sell this property.
So they have a purchase and sale agreement that's been fully executed and a deposit made. So the seller of a property can't just change their mind. They could, but then they would be in breach of contract and could face legal consequences for canceling the escrow.
That's exactly right.
Go ahead, Shane.
So, about the ballot and the vote. I had some communications with Nancy, and we were talking about numbers on how many people were sent ballots. At the start, our building wasn't sent ballots because they weren't aware that it was bonded out in the actual parcel. I've also talked to other owners, some of which are in the room, that didn't receive the ballots at all, or didn't receive the number of ballots they were supposed to get. So, and apparently this question has been sent to the board and I haven't gotten the answer yet, but my title search that I sent out letters to went to 264 parcel owners. I took out duplicates, got down to about 200. Olin has 7 and KC Properties has whatever, 6 or 7. So the numbers that were sent to me in an email were 162 owners that were sent out, which means 2/3 is 108. But my numbers, which I did confirm with Nancy, that the streets that my title search came back from, the 10 streets that I had in my list, were all in the business park, and then she corrected me and said plus the 5. So however many are on that church and storage area over there, we're at somewhere between 264 and 270 parcels that should have a ballot. So what are we doing to confirm that, one, everybody got their ballot? Because I got another call this morning from somebody that didn't get their ballot. And are we on the same page in terms of what the true number really is?
Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that. And this is something that you and I have talked about in recent days, and you've expressed your concerns. I can tell you our goal is to make sure that every parcel owner receives a ballot and has a chance to vote one way or the other. You're getting into the weeds here for me as to numbers of parcels and numbers of ballots, and I'm happy to have that discussion with you in conjunction with talking to my clients to get you more information. And I think we were going to talk this afternoon, so we can address it. I can't respond to the math issues right now that you're raising about parcels and ballots. I don't have that information.
Obviously, that's when an email comes back and says we need 2/3 of 162. Yeah, I mean that's
Right.
a big.
Now, we'll respond to you substantively. I just don't have the info to do that right now.
I have a question. My concern is if this does go through and you're talking about 75 beds to start, we don't know how many beds would be there and how many people from out of the area would live there. Is this going to be a wet shelter? That hasn't been, Lynn has said about that. A wet shelter, I know, is not the best environment for our students just down the street from this parcels, for our residents just up the hill, and for the business park. All of this is going to diminish our values all the way around. San Clemente is not what it used to be. I've been here for 36 years, and I'm seeing it depleting little by little because of these things happening. We, as owners and citizens of San Clemente, really need to take control of this. We can't let everyone, the whole state, it's not just San Clemente. Everyone is having this issue with homeless. Are we going to be another San Francisco? Are we going to be another LA? Is this what we want for San Clemente? It used to be a retirement city. This is what it was known for. Now we have the homeless. I fear the homeless. I'm sorry. There's a lot that have come across to be homeless because of unfortunate circumstances. But I fear them. They're not the nicest people sometimes. and they do have issues. I, for one, personally know 2 homeless people in my family. They don't want to change. They love being out there. Believe me, they like the shelter, but they like to roam. They like their drugs. They like all of the above. That's not our problem. Our problem is to protect our properties, our kids, our community. And I'd just like to see a resolution from all of us to work together.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kristen.
For those who did not get their ballots, how did they get them?
Talk to me after the meeting today, and we will make sure that gets rectified.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dale Lyon. I'm the Senior Vice President of Bowling. And gentleman is correct. We have a formal offer that we did send to the board. We would have entertained, as I think the city would have, had someone contacted all the members of the association and said, we're going to put this out for sale. But that was never done.
That was never done.
That was never done.
Not continued.
But you have it now, and secret ballot, no secret ballot, we're voting no. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to have 10 votes, or because Nancy wasn't sure, or I only got 4 cents.
You have 7 parcels.
So 7 parts.
It says in this letter here that each member may cast 1 vote. So is it 1 vote per parcel or 1 vote per member? Because 1 member may own 12 properties per parcel.
It's per parcel.
And so I only got 4. We should got, I get 7 bills. So I think at least I should get 7 votes. But, you know, secret ballot, no secret ballot, we're voting no on as many ballots as I get my hands on. So I hope you all do that.
But to
Vote often.
yeah, to Tom's credit, I mean, he's right that the city has had this option forever and didn't. But now the feet are under the fire a little bit, and now they're given the direction to do it. So, in my opinion, that's the way to go. I don't think Olin should have to step up. I think the city can step up and do it. And
The city, we would have given the parcels to the city 3 years ago, and they said, hey, we're not interested, get out of here.
but you
It's
do know
unfortunate.
now. Yeah, you know now they're interested, right?
I just heard James say they're interested. We're under contract, and we will get sued if we breach that contract.
Let me explain the process on the city. I can't just go out and buy property. I'm the city manager. I don't have the authority to buy property without the city council direction. I met with Bob on a Friday. I told him I don't see why the city wouldn't be interested in buying this property. Yes, we talked about it 3 years ago. There wasn't an interest 3 years ago to do it. But I told him, I said, I would fully anticipate the council being interested in the property. But I told him I have to go to the city council collectively, which I did at the next council meeting, and discussed it with them and received direction. By that time, the property was already under contract for sale, and I was not able to put an offer in. But I have direction to buy it if it becomes available.
And I think a difference was about 3 years ago was that the city was approached to purchase the land for the sole intent of having a homeless shelter versus now the intent would be to buy the land to prevent a homeless shelter.
And as I remembered, it was just, here's the property, you guys maintain it. And I don't think there was any discussion at that time. Ed Connor was insane to do the property. My recollection may be wrong, but I think at that time, the expense of $35,000 plus a year for the maintenance fees and everything was a little too rich for our thoughts.
James, this might have occurred before you came on, but during the public hearings regarding the homeless zoning designation under SB2, our proposal was that we would give the parcels to the city for use as the homeless zone. And so there wasn't a proposal for construction of a shelter. It was just the city and the residents and the owners were all wrestling with the issue of, okay, we've got to comply with the state law. We've got to put the zone in somewhere in the city. We talked about doing it in the Kai Industria area, talked about doing it in the park, talked about other options. This was an option that we pressed with the city, not for construction of a shelter, but as to where the zoning would go in order to comply with state law, just to clarify.
And I think one of the concerns with it was that proximity to the high school.
A couple more questions then, and I think we should wrap it up in 5 minutes so people can go back to work.
Go ahead.
One quick thing. First, thank you very much for setting this up. Taking this, and Gwen, thank you for getting the letters out and letting all us owners know exactly what's happening. Nice the board has done that. Thank you for the pictures in this, because 3 of our properties are in here. And to say that, you know, that this land across Pico is not going to impact us, whether it's in or out of the association, it's right across the street. I mean, it's going to impact, it's going to bring an element to the neighborhood. And I just don't think that that's, I think it's naive on our part to say it's in or it's out, it's across the street. Thank you again for putting this together.
Go ahead.
Is the ballot going to be valid since it is incorrect and it states that this property is within the home zone area? So everyone who's voting thinks that this Pico lot is in the SB2 zone, but it's not. So that ballot is incorrect. Is that still going to be valid? Even if we all, let's say we reject it, are they going to come back and say, well, the ballot is not correct?
We'll take a look at that. My understanding is that it is in a zoning overlay but there was no zoning change. But we will take a look at that.
Okay, but it's not in the SB2 zone, and it says it is. So, okay, I just want to.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your.
That ballots are valid.
I appreciate that. We'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
So when are you gonna do, sorry, when are you gonna, to let everybody know, when are you gonna look at that and tell everybody that it's either valid or not valid that we're voting? I think that's important.
Sure.
We gotta know, when would that be? And
Well-
who's gonna,
We're getting feedback from the owners on a number of issues, including ballot issues, including the issue that was just raised. And I'll be talking to the board this week, and we will let you know if there's any further communications, if there's any need to resend ballots. We will let you know as soon as possible.
And just one more thing, as far as ballots, we're partners in one of Parcels. When she has vote, I have a vote, but we only got one ballot to one of our addresses.
Nancy Majerick is here, who's the property manager. She can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's one vote per parcel. So if you're co-owners, tenants in common, whatever, you each don't get a vote personally, it's per parcel. Is that right, Nancy?
That's correct. When do you expect to close escrow, or when is the due diligence expiration of this?
Due diligence expiration is, I believe it's 7 days following the vote. And so the vote would mean, I think, the date of tabulation of the votes.
And then how many days after it closes?
I have to double check the contract.
What kind of damages would the association be facing if they did breach the contract and didn't sign the deed and close escrow?
Well, we'd be facing cause of action for specific performance, that is to enforce the contract. We'd be facing legal fees associated with breach of the contract and probably other measures of damages.
If the vote doesn't, yes or no?
No, that's not dependent on the vote. That would be dependent on whether we breach the contract. So by, for example, ignoring the contract and selling the property to another seller. If the vote, the vote is separate, that's not a breach of the contract if we lose the vote.
Is it possible to tell Rancho Coalition that you're going to cancel the vote and that we're just going to close up escrow, or? It
Doubtful.
certainly seems like.
Doubtful. That would be a breach of the contract. I mean, I haven't even thought of that, but it would certainly be a breach of the contract or the duty of good faith and fair dealing that's implied in the contract. No question.
I keep coming back to this issue of transparency ahead of time. I realize there were no other offers on the table, and that property did not the city, et cetera, but given the hot button nature of the issue, if there was not an error in law, there was an error in judgment here on the part of the board of directors in just in the way that they handled this. Perfectly within their rights, I suppose, but I know that, or I believe that the members of the board of directors have been there a long time, perhaps too long in some cases. I'm just going to say for the record here, I put my name on the ballot. I would be in this landscape room, 2 buildings from Park. My name is Joan Berry. I'm not dying to serve on the board in any way, shape, or form, other than to prevent things like this from happening in the first. So I'm not a politician here. But I'm just saying that if people want to see a little bit more transparency or something, I'll be happy to distribute my name and then call me away. But it doesn't take any of those things. And by extension, get others off.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay, if the vote is no, and then, so you will not technically be in default if you cancel the escrow, right? Because it's contingent upon it being removed from the CC&R, so you can technically cancel the escrow if the vote is no.
We would not cancel the escrow if the vote is no. We would not, we being the seller, right, the association.
Yes,
What would happen if the vote is no is that the buyer would elect not to purchase the property, would not be obligated to purchase the property. Nobody would be in breach. Again, let me remind folks, and I appreciate all the comments, and I know this is important and it's heartfelt. A developer could put a homeless shelter in the business park today, given compliance with other permitting and city regulations. So we are not, the board's decision to sell this property is not a decision to advocate a homeless shelter in San Clemente. It's a business decision. And we don't know whether the purchaser will be able to develop a homeless shelter. I personally think there are significant obstacles to that, but we, in our cover letter, tried to make clear that we thought it would be uncertain, and we thought it would make development of a homeless shelter with the body of the park less likely. We still do believe that. And I would not say that the development of a shelter in the 10 acres is a fait accompli by any stretch. That's the context in which we're operating. We're not advocating for the buyer. We want to dispose of the property. The buyer can do what they want with it, and they are subject to a number of state, local, and county environmental, open space, permitting, and other regulations.
I'll just say in counterpoint to that is that we have an SB2 zone overlay. State law requires us to have that overlay zone. I don't see us doing away with that SB2 zone. So even if a shelter by some chance got built in Pico Canyon, our zoning is not going away. Our overlay is not going away, which would still give by right a shelter operator the opportunity to come into the business park.
That's exactly what I was talking about when I asked you about the state law. The state of Sacramento will step in. That's what I think is going to happen. So all this here going on today, I want you all to know how I feel. I think it's all academic. I think there's no practical relevance to it because I think the federal government's going to get involved, the state government's going to get involved, and they're going to tell counties and cities that you have to have a homeless shelter in your city. It is state law and it is required. That's where I think we're headed.
They haven't gotten to that point
The
yet.
state's going to pay for it.
But we're not a central location, so a regional shelter here is not the best place to
We're not close to no, but I know I'm getting my point across.
I just want to, I don't disagree with James, but I want to offer a counterpoint to your counterpoint, which is that
Go back and forth.
if in the future a homeless shelter proposal comes up in the body of the business park, the proponents have to comply with a number of laws, regulations, CC&Rs, and what will happen is that if that is a proposal that could come up, if it's cost effective, and we've talked about economies of scale, maybe it won't be cost effective, maybe it will be, to try to develop that, is going to go through the rigorous public hearing process. It's going to have a lot of opposition. It's going to have all of us in this room and most of us in opposition. It's going to have James possibly in opposition. Just like in August, he was required to bring up that proposal before the city council. He said he didn't recommend that he bring it up, and he brought it up, and the city council shot it down unanimously. So nothing is a fait accompli. No battles involved in this issue are permanent because of the overlay. I agree with you on that point.
Speaking of the overlay, Jay, question for you is, say hypothetically, property sold, Ed Carter's successful, and he built a shelter there. Could you then after the fact, take the overlay and move it to where the shelter is and then cut off any additional option of somebody having by right the ability to put a shelter?
And this will be the last answer. We provided lunch, we didn't provide dinner.
That's an interesting question, and I'd need to review that with the city attorney and get back to you. I'm more than happy to do that, but I can't answer that. That's out there.
All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Tom, for being here. Thank you, Shane, for being here. Thank you, Outlets at San Clemente, for providing the venue. Please join the chamber. We need the clout, so Susie's here on the way out. If you would join the Chamber of Commerce, we would really appreciate the support. Thank you all for coming.